Thank you to Carlos Kareem Whittam for providing us with this welcome. I want to hold space and extend a special welcome, in no particular order, to all Black people, African Americans, Africans, immigrants, Muslims, refugees, transgender, non-binary, gender-expansive folks, and gender non-conforming folks, femmes, queer folks, all people of African descent, undocumented folks, people living with disabilities, both visible and invisible, to renters, low-income folks, those who have been displaced or gentrified, those who are far from home, whether by choice or circumstance, those who have to send money back home, to all survivors, mothers and primary caregivers, those previously incarcerated, teachers, and a big shout out to all the organizers here on this call today. Thank you for all the hard work that you do. We see all of you and know that all parts of you are welcome here. Thank you to the Native American Youth and Family Center for providing us with this land acknowledgement. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we are gathering today is the traditional homelands of a diverse array of indigenous tribes and bands. Multnomah County rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia River, and which is now home to a vibrant Native community representing over 400 different tribal nations. We recognize Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of this land and acknowledge the enduring relationship between the land and the people since time immemorial. We would like to respectfully acknowledge the areas that were once home to thriving, connected Black communities. The fundamental state of settler colonialism still exists today. Oregon was founded as a white utopian state, and colonialism has hit this area hard and is still doing grave damage in the form of gentrification and the displacement of Black people, sometimes as far as outside of their home state. Since Black people were forcibly brought to the United States in 1619 and enslaved, which was 400 years ago, up until today, oppression continues. We acknowledge the twinned dehumanizations of Indigenous land and Black bodies that were turned into property in the name of U.S. imperialism. It is also important to move beyond acknowledgement and reflect on your own history that brought you to this place. This displacement acknowledgement and the land acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. There is a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the 2024 Reimagining Public Safety Debate, hosted by Imagine Black and produced by Labs. My name is Joy Elise Davis. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a Black femme. I have dark brown eyes. My hair is blonde, and I have shoulder-length leeks. I'm wearing an oversized purple sequin suit today with a white blouse. I also have some oversized Black glasses, and I am wearing Black boots. As Imagine Black's president and executive director, I am super honored to be sharing space with these amazing candidates. So let's get into it. This debate will unapologetically center Black issues. This event is for the entire Black community, especially those who feel disengaged from politics. This debate will narrowly be focused on public safety and will offer a unique chance to hold candidates accountable to the needs and demands of progressive Black Portlanders. During this debate, you will learn about the candidates and hold space for candidate accountability. And it is really important to note that even though Imagine Black can endorse candidates, this filming is not an endorsement. We're going to be doing that a little bit later after we're done filming. Now let's welcome the candidates. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. We're going to ask that you both share your name, your pronouns. If you can briefly describe yourself, so your skin tone, your hair, your clothes, jewelry, anything of note that you think is important for our visually impaired folks. And then we're going to start with you first, Angelita. You'll have some time on the clock.
Thank you. Hello, Portland. My name is Angelita, or Angelita. I'm running for Portland City Council in District 3, and I am a 28-year-old young Latina woman with long brown hair and brown eyes and black winged eyeliner, and I'm wearing a purple dress and a seashell necklace. And I'm running for Portland City Council in District 3 because I'm an anti-hunger policy advocate. I used to do constituent services at City Hall, and I feel very passionately about connecting people to resources and to their local government in a way that they haven't been able to before. I also firmly believe that a lot of the issues that we're facing in our city today are due to income inequality, and my platform really centers addressing income inequality, making sure that people have the resources they need to live a life of dignity, addressing climate change, and making a Portland that works for everybody equally. So I look forward to talking more today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to pass it to you, Steve. Your time starts now.
Hi, my name is Steve Novick. I'm a 61-year-old white guy with brown hair with a bunch of gray in it now. I'm wearing a button-down light blue shirt and jeans and also black boots. And I'm 4 feet 8 inches tall, and my left hand is made of stainless steel. It's the traditional like hook kind of prosthetic hand as opposed to anything new and fancy. I grew up in Cottage Grove, Oregon, outside Eugene. I spent 9 years as an environmental lawyer for the Federal Justice Department suing polluters. I came back to Oregon, and I've had a bunch of different jobs, one of which was working to fight ballot initiatives by Bill Sizemore, who some people might remember, that were designed to attack but working people and public services. I spent 4 years in the Portland City Council, where I was focused a lot on transportation funding, transportation safety. One of the things we did when I was in the council was we established the small donor election program that Angelita and I are both running on, where the city matches small donations. Another thing that we did was we passed a strong ban the box ordinance to prevent employment discrimination against people with a history of involvement with the criminal justice system. And I was proud we did it. To be honest, I haven't seen data on how well that's working. And one of the jobs I didn't mention is I had a job where the whole purpose of this nonprofit was to let people know where tax dollars go. And I think that's a really important thing for electeds to do, and to keep an eye on whether you're using tax dollars effectively. And as far as public safety is concerned, what my passion is, we overspend on prisons, and the city, I think, should at least be lobbying the state. But I sort of have a plan for how to change that, which I'll talk about later. But we way overuse prisons, not just for nonviolent crime, but for violent crime too.
Thank you so much. We're going to be getting into quite a lot of topics, but for the folks listening and watching, I'm going to let you know a little preview of what our format would look like. So we have 4 long formatted questions. We'll have 15 minutes total for each one of those questions. So each candidate will have opportunity to answer a question. It'll be 2 minutes each. We'll have some timers going, and if you go over, I will let you know. Afterwards, we're going to do one of my favorite parts of this debate is our rapid fire section, where we're kind of go through 16 questions. Our candidates can only answer with a yes, no, or pass. It's going to be pretty fun. I'm really excited for it. We should be perfectly great on time, but if we need to open up for discussion, we'll have a little bit of time after you both address each question to kind of talk about it and dive a little bit deeper. With that, let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into the first question. So let's start it with 2020. So in 2020, thousands of people marched and protested in the city of Portland demanding racial justice. Some protesters called for police reform. Some called for defunding to drastically shrink the size of the police budget, while others called for complete abolition. 4 years later, some elected officials still think of police response when they hear the phrase public safety. At Imagine Black, we think this definition is too narrow. So my question is, and I'm going to start with you first, Novick, what is your definition of community safety? What are your plans to reimagine public safety? Your time starts now.
So, I mean, safety encompasses a large array of topics. Having a safe place to sleep, being safe as much as possible from disease, being safe from preventable medical issues. I mean, such as maternity mortality. It also does include being safe from violent crime or for property crime. And I think, let's see, I mentioned, and it refers to safety on the streets, traffic safety, which is a huge issue in this city. We've seen this horrific rise in traffic deaths. The city has a role to play in providing some services. Among the ones you listed are parks. The city can invest in housing, but it has limited resources to do so. The county has a lot more money to address homelessness issues, for example. And the city is not really set up to provide health care, although the city can helpfully connect people to healthcare services. In terms of reimagining public safety, I referred earlier to the fact that we spend a huge amount of money in this state and this country on prisons, far more than we used to. And that is partly because prison is a free resource to prosecutors. When some prosecutor sends somebody to prison, the state has to pay for it. They don't have to worry about the cost of it. I can't think of any other public service where the person deciding how to spend the money doesn't have to budget for it. And we all know that prison does, there's some people that need to be locked away forever, but generally longer time in prison does not deter crime. In fact, it makes people more likely to reoffend. So I would think the city should lobby the state to give each county a public safety budget for everything, including prisons, which means that if you don't spend money on prisons, you have more money to spend on housing, reentry programs, drug treatment, all the things that make a big difference in terms of public safety.
Thank you. Same question to you. What is your definition of community safety, and what are your plans to reimagine public safety? Your time starts now.
Thank you. I think that community safety has been very narrowly defined to only be inclusive of a policing definition, which is traditionally if there's a low level or even violent crime that happens, you send police in to address the issue. And my view of public safety is much more broad. I think as an anti-hunger policy advocate and a legislative strategist, I often think about how money impacts everything. And the reality is that I see that crime, public safety, a lot of what Steve said with regards to public health, housing, community, that all provides public safety as well. And I think that only addressing income inequality is going to be the root of a lot of what was said prior, so I won't repeat that. But I think for me, as far as what I'm looking to do as a city council member would be to expand alternative resources like Portland Street Response. We need a mental health crisis response team that is not criminalizing people for being mentally unwell, for needing resources, or for even having addiction. These are not crimes. These are health issues that need to be responded to with a non-armed, non-police response. I also think that we are seeing other programs at the city really be very fruitful and work when they are addressing the needs of community directly. One of the questions that we'll get into later is the Office of Violence Prevention and the work that they're doing there. But by funding youth programs, making sure that kids have access to education, making sure that kids have access to food is going to ensure that they're not going to be joining a gang or getting into that they actually have a life path that is sustainable and joyful and that their community is there to support them. So I'm really invested in making sure that we are addressing the income inequalities that have also been created by our prior form of government because we had no representation in certain parts of the city. So I'm really excited as well to work with candidates or colleagues in District 1 to make sure that Outer East Portland has all of everything that it deserves to have.
Thank you so much. I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of what you all both just mentioned. Starting back with you, Steve, you spoke about lobbying at the state level and the responsibility for our counselors to reach across, jurisdictions and talk a little bit. You also mentioned some services, some vital services that help prevent crime that may not be within the scope of the city. Can you talk a little bit more about what your plan is to work with maybe the county or even some of our healthcare systems to actually think about what it looks like to prevent crime?
So there's a criminal defense lawyer I've known for almost 30 years in town, and I asked her a few months ago something I should have asked her a long time ago, which is, if we were going to prevent crime, what would we do? And she said, invest more in drug treatment. That the people getting off drugs is key to, and I think she probably included alcohol in that, as key to preventing crime. The city is a small part of the public safety system. But obviously the city is partly responsible for public safety. The county has the jail, and the county is supposedly the mental health provider. We do not have enough mental health services. We do not have enough treatment services. And one way of, and the legislature is supposedly focused on the problem, they've allocated some money to it, but I think one significant source of money is the money that we are spending on prisons. Because we spend a hell of a lot of money on prisons, and it's an overused resource because, again, it's free. Prosecutors can send people to prison without thinking about the cost. So what I would want to do is go with the county to the state and say, you need to tell prosecutors that prisons have a cost. And you need to tell the counties, we're going to give you an overall budget for public safety. And you can spend it on whatever you want that's related to public safety. But if you don't spend a huge chunk of it on prisons, you could spend more on drug treatment, on reentry programs for people being released from prison, on housing for people, on mental health services, a bunch of things that we relate to public safety, and which, unlike sending somebody to prison for 7 years instead of 2 years, which winds up actually making them more likely to reoffend, actually make a difference in terms of preventing crime.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back with you because I would love to hear a little bit more about how you would work with the county as well. But I'm going to pass it to you. Responding to what you mentioned a little bit earlier, I know you've been really outspoken and have been really, especially on social media, been talking about this issue for a pretty long time. I also know that you've been having some conversations around whether it's decrim or talking about drug treatment. Can you share a little bit more about your position and how you think you'll work across not just the aisle, but also with the county and other spaces to really make sure that we are thinking about community safety holistically?
Are you talking about House Bill 4002?
I am, I am.
I'll get into it. I lobbied on House Bill 4002, so this is perfect. So I work at Partners for Hunger-Free Oregon, and we, as an organization, an anti-poverty statewide organization, decided to take the stance to fight against recriminalization of drugs in Oregon, because we, as anti-hunger advocates, know how much that is going to affect low-income people, Black, Brown, Indigenous communities in Oregon. And we decided that it was time to bring that lens into that work because state legislators were not necessarily talking about it from that approach. I have firmly stood against recriminalization of drugs. I think the fact that we are punishing people for addiction when it is a health issue that needs to be treated through health services is a huge problem. And right now, we don't have the treatment centers for people who are willingly and begging, trying to get into those treatment centers to make sure that they're getting the care that they need. So the Hoover Center in Oregon is actually turning away around 200 people a month who are trying to get into treatment. So we're having this whole discussion about whether or not people should be punished for the crime of having an addiction. And we're not even offering the services to send them to treatment or to deferment instead of sending them to jail, which means that inevitably we are going to have young Black, Brown, and Indigenous people going into our local jails and prisons and perpetuating the prison industrial complex. So I think it was very short-sighted for the legislature to overturn this policy so quickly. There's also a lot of issues with House Bill 4002 and the fact that there is not enough funding for staffing so that when these treatment centers are created, which will be a decade down the line anyways, we are not going to have sufficient staffing to ensure that the programs are successful once they get off the ground. So I think that we were sold a false promise that we're just going to recriminalize drugs and then all of our problems will be solved and we can put these problem people away somewhere where we don't have to see them, because that's really what the discussion is here. It's not about treating the heart or the root of the issue. It's about just hiding people so that we don't have to deal with them as a society. And we're not going to have the results that we want from that.
Thank you so much. It seems like I'm hearing some synergy around more treatment centers and putting money in the right place. I'm going to go back to you a little bit. Thank you for sharing that policy idea and particularly like breaking it down of how it would possibly look. You were formerly a part of our city as a former commissioner. Can you talk a little bit more about what you see as an opportunity to work with those different, we're working with the county in particular, and what that could look like?
I mean, the city and the county, as you know, have had rather a lousy relationship. I've known my county commissioner, Julia Rim Edwards, for a very long time, and we have a good relationship. I think that the city and the county, I think that a lot of the voters in Portland and Multnomah County have the sense that they voted for lots of taxes to solve lots of problems, and the problems aren't being solved, so what the hell is happening with the money? So I think one thing that the city and the county need to do together is, first of all, stop blaming each other for stuff. But second, I think city and county officials need to be sort of engaging the public on what do we spend money on? What results are we looking for? What's the right balance of what we spend money on in terms of things like public safety? What can the city do with its resources? What can the county do with its resources? What can't they do because they don't have the resources? And so I think that that just having that conversation and being honest about that is itself useful. And I think that, again, in terms of public safety, we can, collectively point out that, as Angelita was just saying, there aren't the resources for drug treatment, for example. But there also is all this money being spent on prisons, which the state gives us for free. And I think that, this is something I've been talking about for 10 years. And actually, if Mike Schmidt had stayed as DA, I think it's something he would have lobbied on. But I think that to say, look, we know as a city and a county that investing in prisons is not the best use of public safety dollars, but it's something the state gives us for free. Why don't you give us the option to spend it on something that actually works?
Thank you so much. I'll insert some fun commentary here. I know at Imagine Black, we talk a lot about prisons and the cost, like you mentioned, but also just inhumane it is, how difficult it is to get the services that you need, and it's not the best way to get the health care or the treatment services.
And could I add something
Go
about
for
this?
it, yeah.
So
Let's
I
give it a
think
minute.
there's a criminal justice researcher in Florida named John Pfaff who wrote this book, I can't remember the name of it, where he says that liberals in America have made it sound like the prisons are used mostly to lock people up for nonviolent drug offenses, which isn't really true. And what he said is, yeah, most of the people in prison at any given time are there for some violent crime, but that doesn't mean that they should be there for as long as they are for that violent crime. That if somebody isn't just totally beyond the pale, at some point they're going to come out, and it does not make people less likely to reoffend if they're in for 7 years rather than 2. So, you hardly see any politicians in this country, except maybe Cory Booker, saying we need to reduce prison sentences for violent crime, but we need to talk about that, because we do. Because if somebody beats somebody up in a bar fight, does no good to lock them up for 6 years instead of 6 months or whatever.
Thank you for that. With 1 minute, I'm going to pass it to you. Do you have any comments? I have some additional questions, but yeah, do you want to talk at all about prisons and anything around that space? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we talk about, I really appreciate that Steve is bringing up that jails and prisons are being used as a shorthand for offering the treatment that we actually need. And I want to point out that our county jails are also not only not giving people those resources, but actively harming them as well. The reality is that in Multnomah County, we had numerous people who were waiting in our local county jails die because they committed suicide, they overdosed, or they were not given the proper access to medical treatment that they are required to receive. And so the fact that we are sending people to our local jails because there are no treatment centers available for them to a place where they could possibly die means that you are sentencing people to death for the crime of being poor or for the crime of having addiction or other diseases, right? And I just think that is very indicative of the fact that we don't value these people, and we would rather them die or be hidden away from society than actually treat each other as human beings that are deserving of love, care, and community, who are everyone is able to be reintegrated back. I do firmly believe that, and the fact that our local jails are set up in such a way that it would cause people to lose their lives is very concerning.
Thank you for bringing that in. Thank you both. I want to circle back to something you were talking about a little bit earlier. Just your background as being, a hunger, advocate and working so much within the food systems. Can you talk a little bit about community safety as a whole? I think right now, again, we usually really narrow it within police or sometimes fire and are a little bit into street response, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Do you have any plans or any ideas of what it would look like to really think about food and hunger for the city, and something that I don't think the city has talked about enough? But yeah, I'll give you your 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually talking with a lot of advocates who do more like agricultural and placemaking work, and some ideas that have been floating around from different neighborhoods in District 3 were about creating communal like food forests in the local parks that are sustainable, that are created in such a way that you have buy-in from the neighbors, so that everyone is actually communally taking care of this space. And we know that in the city of Portland, it's highly competitive to get into a community garden. Sometimes you're on a list for 10 years. So this is a community need and want that people have that I think would also bring people together if they're having to tend to this food resource together and take care of it. And I think just having access to land that is owned by the community, that they're getting to take care of, that they're getting to cultivate, that is a communal process where you're meeting your neighbors, you're having to negotiate together. All of that is bonding. All of that is community safety, in my opinion, because you're actually getting to know your neighbors, especially in a time where people are so isolated from each other. So I think that's something I'm really interested in. I also just think on a more simple level, we need to make sure that the rent is affordable so that people can actually afford their food at the grocery store. It doesn't have to be as fancy as creating a food forest in your local city, although I think that's very exciting. People just need to have lower rent so that they can actually afford to go to the grocery store and get food. And I've talked about this before, but I'm one of 3 candidates that has experienced homelessness in the city of Portland. And when I was in college, I was homeless for a little under a year, and I did not have regular access to food, and my friends had to steal food from the cafeteria to keep me fed. And there are certain people on the campaign trail that have used that against me and said that that I'm advocating for crime and theft. And I said, no, but we're organic beings that need to eat. And if we don't meet people's basic human needs, then they're going to do whatever they have to do to get access to what they need. So I think that when we provide that safety and support for people, we're just going to see a much happier and more thriving city.
Thank you so much for that. How disappointing for folks to weaponize something like that. And thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with us. We're almost done before we move on to talk a little bit about the Portland street response, but something you mentioned.
Would you mind if I said something about food?
Oh, you know what? I would love to. Let's go for it.
The city, providing food to people doesn't fall within any particular city responsibility. And generally, I'm going to be cautious about saying the city should spend money on like a new thing that it's not doing now. However, the city has the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which has lots of money, lots more than people imagined. And I think, the biggest source of carbon emissions is transportation, and I think the Clean Energy Fund should be investing a lot more in climate-friendly transportation. But about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from food, and it comes from, some foods are really climate-friendly, like lentils and chickpeas. Some foods are really climate-unfriendly, like beef or pork. And so I actually think that for one thing, I think the city should encourage or perhaps even require food establishments to like post up on the wall the sort of relative climate friendliness to different kinds of food, so people know that, because I don't think they do. But also, I think that there's an argument for the city to subsidize climate-friendly food, at least on an episodic basis, to say, for this 2-week period, anybody can just take lentils from the grocery store, because that's probably the most, in terms of the amount of nutrition for the least amount of greenhouse gases, that's probably lentils and chickpeas are probably it. And say, we will subsidize that, and we also hand out good recipes so that people can find out delicious ways to make lentils and chickpeas. Because if people are able to make that transition to using, to more plant-based diet, that does in fact impact global warming, and obviously it's lower income people will benefit from having any kind of free food. That's one of my more out there ideas, but I really think it's something that needs to be explored, because politicians tend to shy away from the food part of climate change because they're afraid they're going to be accused of banning hamburgers. But we can at least be encouraging and helping people to eat more climate-friendly food.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate both of your imagination in the space and backing it up with ideas and even policy proposals that could happen. We're about to move on, but there was something that was mentioned by you a little bit earlier that I'd love to get your thoughts on. You talked about community members participating in the budget, and I was like, participatory budgeting is what I heard a little bit about. I want to just hold some space for it. I know there's a campaign that's currently paused, but hopefully we'll come back, and wanted to get your thoughts on participatory budgeting and what that could potentially look like now that our government is changing quite a bit in Portland, and having a little bit more opportunities for our elected officials to do policy work and to really dive into the budget. Budgeting is going to be really, really important coming up. And yeah, would love to hear you talk about participatory budgeting if you can.
Well, I'm delighted by the idea of participatory budgeting. I think it's such an exciting way to get people involved in local government in a way that they're normally very cynical about, because we don't really make it accessible or easy for people to understand. I know I worked at City Hall for 3 years. I was doing constituent services, but you learn a lot about the budget doing that. And it's really hard to track and follow. No one knows what the fall bump is, the fall budget monitoring process and all these things, right? And then on top of that, if people don't feel like, you know, in the summer of 2020, we had 75,000 Portlanders write us emails saying that they wanted to either reduce and reallocate the police budget or turn the entire police budget back into community hands for alternative resources, right? And if City Council fails to address what people are coming in mass droves to say, then they don't feel a buy-in for that process. But with participatory budgeting, I think they have access to 5% of the budget, if I'm not mistaken, that community can come together to make proposals around and to decide what they want to do with their city dollars. And I think that also, I firmly believe that power is kind of a corrupting force, and that we need to always give power back to community in the decision-making process whenever possible, so that we are not corrupted by it. Especially with a district system, we have an opportunity to get people's buy-in and input for what they want to see in their communities in a way that we've never seen before. So I love the idea of participatory budgeting. I think the city with the district system could do great outreach on that, and to get people more involved and excited because they actually have a hand in crafting what it is the city is going to do.
Thank you so much. We're going to put some links in our captions with some more information about what we heard. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about budgeting, so we'll get back to you around participatory budgeting. But I just want to share for folks listening and watching that just thinking about the demands of 2020, there's a lot of misinformation that we have defunded our police and that we've even shrunk their budget. And in fact, that is not true. Our current budget for the Portland Police is nearly $3 million. If you look back into 2016, Street Roots did a great article recently that we'll also put in the chat around just how large it has grown. And in 2016 to now, I believe it's a 42% increase, around 88 million increase. So we have not defunded. In fact, we've actually increased it quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit more about some budget. We're going to start with you first, Steve, this time. But in 2020, again, let's go back to this time. Portlanders voted overwhelmingly to institute the Portland Street Response, which is an alternative emergency response call for vulnerable Portlanders experiencing crisis. Despite the Portland Street Response popularity and the expectation that the program would eventually evolve into being 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of a service, the budget has been under attack for 2 years, resulting in the slashed budget and really a slow implementation. My question to you to start it off is, where do you see Portland Street Response within the context of public safety? And then a follow-up to that is, what are your plans to ensure the future of the Portland Street Response and its services? I'm going to get you for 2 minutes.
So, I mean, the idea of Portland Street Response is twofold, that you should have somebody other than the police responding to low acuity calls, and that Portland Street Response can help steer people who need services into services. Portland Street Response does provide the first part. Somebody shows up for some calls other than the police. I don't know, how many more calls they should take. I suspect they could take more, because when I was, crime was lower when I was on the council, but I would ask the police, why do you need the same number of police when crime is way down from 1994? And they said, well, most of the calls we get aren't actually about crime. And I was like, okay, then should police be responding to that? So I haven't seen like a real sort of breakdown of, here's how many calls the police still take that really aren't about crime, So Portland Street Response should be handling those. We need to see that sort of analysis. The other thing, though, is that Portland Street Response was envisioned to be connecting people with services, and the truth is, because as Angelita's been saying, the services largely don't exist, it hasn't been all that successful at that. There's a study PSU did that said that of 7,400 calls Portland Street Response did, 10 resulted in people getting into housing. 20 resulted in people getting into a primary care provider. So I think that the effectiveness of Portland Street Response is limited by the lack of services for them to refer people to. So it may be that we can justify expanding Portland Street Response significantly just for that purpose of having them respond to a call instead of the police. But unless there are resources for the services they're supposed to be putting me in touch with which the city generally does not provide, like housing, medical care, drug treatment, then the effectiveness of Portland Street Response will be less than people imagine it would be.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it to you for the same question. Where do you see the Portland Street Response within the context of public safety? And what are your plans to ensure the future of the Portland Street Response and its services?
Thank you for that question. I think that Portland Street Response is an absolutely vital service within the emergency response system that we desperately need. And I would say that, yes, there are a lot of limited resources that prevent Portland Street Response from connecting people to those resources. That's not a fault of the program. And the very fact that more people are going to live because they are not having an armed officer come and respond to them and take their life is alone the value of the program. That in and of itself should be enough, because Portland has been under investigation by the Department of Justice for, I think, over a decade now, because our police killed too many people who were experiencing mental health crises. So we absolutely need this response. We need it now. We need it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, in my opinion. And while we are doing that, we also need to make sure that we are funding supportive services. Something that I really care about with Portland Street Response as well is that I know, talking to the employees, that originally, when I worked in Joanne Hardesty's office and we had created Portland Street Response, we made sure that the employees were very well taken care of, properly compensated, great health insurance, because we know that this is very difficult and emotionally draining work, that there's a lot of secondhand trauma that you absorb as an employee taking care of others who are in crisis, and that if we're not properly taking care of those workers, we're not going to keep them in those positions long term to build relationships with community in the ways that they need to have in order to be as effective in their role as possible. So that's something that I really care about as well. And the Mercury did show that there was a study done by PSU that showed that Portland Street Response was alleviating a lot of police calls. So if police are saying that they don't have enough staff to respond to these calls, they're not the right people to respond to many of them anyways. And Portland Street Response is alleviating their call load so that they can respond to violent crime or theft or something that is actually within the purview of a crime rather than someone who's in need of assistance.
Thank you for that. I'm going to pass it back to you to respond. Anything else you would like to add? Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of
good.
covered it.
Well, then I will add some fun links in. What I would encourage the watchers and viewers to do is to, there's a great series that just came out from Street Roots that talks about some of those numbers that you mentioned around crime, and maybe I'll hold some space today to talk about like how we define crime. And that was actually one of the really great takeaways from the Street Response. The Street Roots, article was talking about, we often hear a lot of talking points in the media and folks discussing, crime is on the rise, and they're really focusing on one type of crime. In reality, that, and even then, that one type is a very small percentage of what we deem as criminal activities. We talk about graffiti is also like one of those things that people deem as a crime, that I would probably argue that maybe both of us, all of us here agree you shouldn't be jailed for graffiti, but maybe not. We'll talk about it. But let's talk a little bit about crime in general. Let's talk about what, you've been on the council before. You said a little bit earlier that there's been there's been more crime now than there has been before. Let's talk about what you've seen and maybe some plans you might have to alleviate that in the future.
Well, we saw between 1994 and about 6 years ago, maybe it sort of tailed off around 2014, there was nationwide a collapse in the amount of crime. And frankly, nobody really knows why. Crime nationally tends to go up and down for reasons that nobody can really figure out. I mean, obviously went up during the pandemic, nobody's quite sure why. What we saw in Portland in particular was a huge rise during the pandemic in violent crime, in particular homicides, at levels we hadn't seen in decades. That has begun to come back down, but I think it's still significantly above the levels we had 8 years ago. So, I mean, I think that, first of all, we should recognize that there's a limit to how much government can do to affect crime trends, because there's a lot of it that we don't understand. I think that government can help by having focused interventions. For example, in Boston, Massachusetts, this last year, as of the middle of this year, they had 4 murders for the entire first half of the year. And part of that they don't understand, but also they have made a very intensive effort to focus on individual places, like micro places, where there's high levels of crime. And crime tends to be really, space specific. There's a hotel, I forget the name of it, in Portland, in my district, at 80th and Milton, for which there was murder after murder. And there was a response to that, and there were police resources deployed there, because whatever else you might say about police, if the police are right there, you probably don't kill somebody in front of them. But what Boston did was they had police focus on those areas, but they also engaged with community groups who were involved with those areas and helped them with funding and interacted with them to try to reduce crime in those very specific areas. So I think I think we could do more investment in community groups, and that should be, because crime is so place-focused, that should be sort of the focus of our efforts, which are never going to be comprehensive, to reduce crime.
Thank you for that. I'm hearing some strategies around funding community-based orgs to help out. And then you also mentioned a little bit of some geographic interventions. I'm going to pass it to you to talk a little bit about what your plan is to reduce quote-unquote crime, and what does that look like for you?
So I think Steve and I might disagree on this a little bit. I actually do think that poverty is the primary cause of crime. And I mean that in every aspect, right? If people are stealing from the grocery store, if you're a young mother who just had a baby and you're stealing baby formula, that's technically a crime, but you need access to that resource. If you are a person facing domestic violence issues, we often don't talk about gun violence and how that happens within the home because it's not visible. And, there's a lot of crime that I think is also exacerbated economically, because if you're a person in a domestic violence situation, you're unable to leave your home because money. You can't go and rent a new apartment and get out of your situation because of economic limitations. So even thinking about the hotel in our district that Steve brought up, part of the reason there's a lot of crime in that area is because there's a lot of drug selling and distribution in that space, and there's a lot of trafficking as well. And I don't mean sex work, I do mean trafficking. And that also is happening because of economic inequality, young Black and brown women that are being targeted for trafficking because they're part of vulnerable communities. And they're vulnerable because they don't have the economic resources to escape situations or, have a different option ahead of them. So I do think that addressing income inequality is going to be a top priority for me as far as addressing crime in the city. And to me, that looks like funding resources, addressing the cost of rent, making sure that we have actually affordable housing that is available to everybody in the public. And I think that when you give people a variety of options to make decisions and have agency in their lives, then we're going to address crime.
Thank you. So much that you shared. I want to thank you both. I want to ask a few more questions about the Portland Street response. Thank you for going with me on that journey around crime. Let's talk about the fact that, again, everything is restructuring with the city of Portland right now. I know the Community Safety Office is changing a little bit. We have all these really great and new deputies and a city manager, all of that. Where do you see the Portland Street response, or where would you like to see them in the future? I know in the past they were underneath fire, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think something like that is appropriate, or would you like to see them be somewhere different? I'm going to pass it to you, just a little bit of imagination. 2 minutes.
I don't have a good answer to that.
Go for
I
it.
mean, I think that there's plays something of a unique role. They're supposed to be alternative to the police, so I wouldn't say that they should be part of the police. They also, they didn't have a great relationship with the fire bureau, so I don't know if that's the correct place. So my instinct is to say that they should be independent, but there should be a limit to how many independent entities, have their own deputy city administrator. So I'll be honest and say, I don't really know. I don't have a good answer to that.
Yeah, that's an answer. I want to thank you for that. I'm going to pass it to you. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not they should stay underneath fire? Do you see them in a different space? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in the past, I was okay with them being in fire. And the more I've learned about some of the dynamics within that space and how the Fire Bureau has responded to Portland Street Response, I would say that they do need to be somewhere else. I think, like Steve, I'm not exactly sure where. Right now, my gut is kind of saying within the Office of Violence Prevention or somewhere like that. Maybe under BOEC, the 911 Bureau that's dispatching them, because what we're also seeing is that Portland Street Response isn't just impacted by a lack of resources for the program itself, a lack of resources for places to take people and refer people, but also by the fact that our 911 system has really suffered under Commissioner Renee Gonzalez. And so unless we have some connected services as far as triaging goes to make sure that Portland Street Response is directly connected and that all of those employees are working in tandem, because I think oftentimes these agencies don't talk to each other, and that can be a real problem as far as how we're triaging the calls.
Thank you. Just go for it. Yeah.
I cannot resist saying that I assume Angelita is not just talking about the fact that Rene Gonzalez himself called 911 for something that obviously wasn't an emergency, which was appalling, but it's one call. That's not because of all the problems of 911. But I thought it was worth mentioning.
Are we talking about TriMet possibly?
Yeah, but he got
more than
off the
one.
train and called 911 because somebody may have rushed him.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, thank you for bringing that in. Wow, I'm interested how much that cost us as city, how much our tax dollars to respond to something that is not real and that isn't a real threat. Thank you both for that. We're going to move on to question 3. We are doing great on time. Is there anything anyone else would like to add about the Portland Street Response as we wrap up and go to the next section? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I do think I have one more thing to add, which is that it's really a tragedy that such a popular program that was popular across political aisles has been actively damaged so much. And I really do believe that this is purely a vendetta from Commissioner Renee Gonzalez and a few others who maybe had history with Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. And the amount of time that I have worked at City Council, I have seen, and at the legislature, where you see that a lot of budgeting decisions are made out of pure pettiness if someone had beef with somebody else prior, and the fact that the public is, we're the ones that suffer for it. So I really think that if you care about Portland Street Response, if this is your program, if this is something that you really want to see, your mayoral candidate is going to be key in that, because the mayoral candidate is going to be able to make the overarching budget with very little input from the rest of City Council in a way that they weren't able to before under the prior form of government. So if this is something that you care about, you better be voting for your mayoral candidate as well.
Thank you. Anything else to add? Yeah.
Actually, can I jump back a couple of questions?
Please, I'm
Because
fine with it.
there's something that I neglected to say, which is, and I'll remind me of talking about gun violence. Portland, Multnomah County as a whole, lags way behind the entire rest of the state in using the red flag law to use a civil process, not a criminal one, to remove guns from people who are a danger to themselves or others. I suspect it's more often used for people who are in danger of suicide than of homicide. But if you look at the numbers, Bend uses it a lot. Washington County and Clackamas County use it much more than we do. And it's hard for me to believe that Portland doesn't have its share of people who have guns or are a danger to themselves and others. And I've asked the police chief about this, and he didn't really have an answer. But I suspect there just, for whatever reason, most of those red flag usage is initiated by police, but it can also be initiated by regular people. And I just don't think that we had the kind of training of the police on that tool, the kind of outreach to the general public on that tool, that could result in using, again, a civil, not a criminal process from taking guns away from people and saving lives. So that's one thing that I really want to find out about. Could we expand the use of that tool to prevent gun deaths by better training and outreach.
Thank you so much for bringing that back. This has been a great, I want to keep talking about this, but I know we have some other questions. So I want to thank you both for what you contributed to this question. For folks listening and watching the Reimagine Public Safety Debate, hosted by Imagine Black and produced by Labs, we are getting into question 3. If you can bear with me, this is a long one, so I have a lot to read, but let's get into it. So Portland, along with other cities across the nation, is experiencing a rise in houselessness driven by the lack of affordable housing. The ongoing COVID pandemic has economically wrecked entire communities, devastated households, and a significant and continued lack of access to mental health services, including healthcare-centered substance use treatment, disorder treatment. Despite credible research, and again, credible research, showing that police sweeps of houseless encampments don't solve houselessness and fail to lead to effective housing solutions. Again, I'm going to bring that back. Despite credible research showing that police sweeps of houseless encampments do not solve houselessness and fail to lead to effective housing solutions, city resources continue to support this harmful practice. So my question, and we're going to start with you, Angelita, this time, how will you prevent displacement of houseless communities and elevate real solutions that result in vulnerable Portlanders finding and maintaining housing? Yeah, 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. We know that sweeps are incredibly costly to the city. I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, it's around $16 million a year just for sweeps alone. And when I did constituent services at the city of Portland, I was the person answering the calls from neighbors who were upset about an encampment near their house, in a park, etc. And what I saw is that if a sweep did end up happening, the neighbors got what they wanted. Usually 3 days later, those same people would be back in that area because they had no shelter spaces available for them to go to, and or they were inaccessible to people for whatever reason. If it's a family, sometimes you have to separate your family when you go into a shelter. Sometimes if you have a physical disability, it's inaccessible. Unless you have low barrier shelters as well, there are people dealing with different issues, including addiction, that maybe those shelters aren't going to be accessible to them. So really, it was just pushing people from sidewalk to sidewalk and not getting to the heart of the issue. So to me, I think that we should reallocate the funding from sweeps. Unless it's like hazardous for some reason, then we need to reallocate the majority of that money into creating the supportive services that we would like to see. And to me, part of that is going to include detox centers and treatment centers that are longer than 24 hours. Something that's happening in District 3 is that we have a 24-hour detox center that is being opened very quickly, and it's kind of a rushed job from the county because they're trying to prevent people from being turned into our local jails instead, now that House Bill 4002 has passed. And what we're seeing is that that's not an effective amount of treatment because it's kind of a revolving door. You're just sending people in who aren't getting properly treated, and they're getting sent back out. So I would love to see this funding instead be used for creating actually accessible shelter spaces that are, or housing that is informed by the people that are going to be using these services. I work a lot with folks at Right to Dream 2, which is an encampment where folks are autonomously organized. They have a council where they make decisions together. And I visited that shelter numerous times. You don't see the same levels of violence that you do in other spaces because people are communally making decisions together. So I'd love to see more investments that give people their power back.
Thank you so much. Same question to you, and we'll give you a little bit more time than 2 minutes as well. How will you prevent displacement of the houseless communities and elevate real solutions that result in vulnerable Portlanders finding and maintaining housing?
So, I mean, as the question says, the houselessness problem is primarily driven by a lack of affordable housing. That is not a problem that I think we are going to really solve anytime soon. We have a housing shortage of tens of thousands of units in the metro area. And especially with interest rates the way they are now, we are not going to build tens of thousands of units overnight. There's some things that we can do in terms of changing zoning, permitting, et cetera, and Angelita talks about some of this on her website, as I do on mine, that could speed the production of housing, but we are not within sight of having enough housing for everybody, so unfortunately we are going to continue to have a level of homelessness for quite some time. I think that we need to find more humane places for people to go. The tiny house villages have been rather successful. I mean, people appreciate having a door to close, so they feel safer. They can have their partner there. They can have their dog there. One thing that you hear when you talk to the city is that, well, there's just not enough locations where you can put the tiny house villages. But I talked to somebody high up in the city who said, well, maybe so, but so far that job is being done by like political staff out of the mayor's office. If it's a priority, then you should hire a small staff of professional people. Their job it is to find those locations. And then the city could go to the county and say, you've got the money to actually run these things and maybe pay for the tiny houses. We've got a site for you to do it. So, I mean, ideally you have locations for people to go, which are humane. I would say that I'm not unalterably opposed to all sweeps. I mean, there are locations where you're a homeless encampment, there's a profusion of crime. I've talked to people in the building trades who say that they're working on building sites that are near a homeless encampment. Their equipment gets stolen, they get harassed. And as a homeless guy said, when I was on the council, it can be hard to distinguish between, as he put it, the peaceful hobos and the thugs. But I think that there are places where you can't, if you can't identify the specific wrongdoers, that there's no choice but to actually do a sweep when the homeless camp has become a focus of crime.
Thank you for that. I have some follow-up. So much there. I'll fall back to you really quickly, just because I know that quote you mentioned was from someone else that you were summarizing. You used the word thug.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
How would
he said hobos too.
He said
Peaceful
hobos. I was like, whoo, I'm feeling it. I think there is, and again, I keep referencing the Street Roots article and their series of articles, but they talked a lot about how there's this perception that, just when you see a houseless person on the street, that they are automatically criminals in some ways, or that they're up to no good. In reality, they reported that actually they're experiencing quite a lot of crimes towards them constantly. And it's really interesting, I would say, as our society that it's automatically assumed that. Let's go back to what you mentioned a little bit earlier. I think we often, as we talk about solutions to houselessness, or we try to figure out what the problem is, I feel like we talk a lot about housing, as we should. But as an org that is a part of the Anti-Displacement PDX Coalition, we also talk about economic development. We talk about the things that are rising up the price of housing. We may not be able to build as quickly as the need is, and I have some thoughts on that I'll share a little bit later, but what is our role as the city around economic development, and how do we actually think about the rising cost of our current housing? I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, thanks for getting back to us on this, because I was just thinking something that I just experienced in my apartment building is that my rent was raised significantly more than a friend's rent who was in the same exact size and unit. And I'm Latina, and this has happened to my family numerous times in Portland, where we found out our rent was illegally raised beyond the threshold in order to kick Latinos out of the building. And then, now I'm a rental services commissioner, and I know my rights and everything a little bit more, so I can advocate for myself. But it made me look more into the city's, the building services, and we found out that they're using AI software called RealPage, which is being used to artificially inflate the cost of rent in the entire country, because landlords are using the AI software to confer with each other in order to raise the cost of rent everywhere. And we're seeing other cities actually take a look into some of this software and ban this type of AI software so that landlords can't work together to artificially increase the cost of rent. I think that's something I would love to see Portland do, especially since the federal government has already started suing RealPage, and they're taking an interest in this as well. I think they'd be a helpful partner. So I think as far as housing, that's something to look into as well, because I don't think that these costs are actually supposed to be this high. I think that they are being artificially inflated. I think everything that Steve said about building more housing is important. And I think as far as revitalizing our districts, we're very lucky in District 3. We have a beautiful district that is it's pretty much flourishing. I think something that I'm really interested in is the economic development and transportation development of 82nd Avenue, and making sure that that area of town has access to rapid, frequent, reliable, and safe transportation so that people can go shopping in that district and just use it more often. So I think that using transportation and environmental design to revitalize our communities is something I'm interested in.
Thank you so much. A similar question to you. I know extensive environmental background, but thinking about economic development, what's the role the city will play? And if we can't build as quickly as the need is, how do we ensure that the prices aren't rising and folks are getting into houses through that?
Well, I really appreciate what Angelita said about the use of AI software to artificial. And I think Elizabeth Warren is trying to take that on at the federal level, and it would be interesting to see what the city can do at the local level. But I do think that the cost of housing, and this is a national problem, and even an international problem, it's not just Portland, is largely driven by our failure to produce enough housing. And there was just an article in the New York Times about how after the housing crunch with the in 2008, the subprime loan thing, the banks became a lot more cautious about investing in housing, and that combined with the barriers, like the legal barriers there are to creating housing, which we in Oregon are starting to climb out of a bit. I actually was an early proponent in the council in 2015 of allowing more duplexes and triplexes to be built in what had been single-family zoned areas. But I think that it is largely a supply and demand thing. This article at the Times talked about how Kalamazoo, Michigan, the prices are skyrocketing because not enough housing is being built. As far as economic development is concerned, I think actually governments spend a lot of time pursuing, quote, economic development strategies, which, are kind of fake. And I think that the best economic development strategy a city can follow is try to make the city as livable and humane as possible, and have amenities like, as Angelita was saying, bus rapid transit on 82nd Avenue, and having parks, and having trees. And if you're a nice place to live, particularly Portland for years had a booming economy, and it wasn't because we had lots of Fortune 500 companies. We don't have a major university, but companies wanted to come here because they knew their employees would want to live here. So I think that the best economic development strategy Portland can follow is to invest in making Portland a nice place to live, rather than having some, complicated, here's our economic development strategy for the 21st century.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate you bringing that in. Also, someone who was really excited about this idea about the bus rapid transit system that never materialized. Have some thoughts on that. Well, you know what? I have to ask because, Prosper Portland is obviously within the city's portfolio, even though it's kind of a weird, interesting relationship. I have to talk about TIF, TIF district. Urban renewal is what people call it, but the tax increment financing, if I'm not mistaken, is either within your district or really, really close in terms of right now the city council is going to be weighing in on whether or not to bring TIF to the space. From our analysis, both with Imagine Black and the anti-displacement PDX, is that program was designed to increase property value. It was designed to actually raise the price. And what does that mean for renters? Someone like myself, as a renter, I live in North Portland. I think a lot about the role that Prosper Portland played in the gentrification and the displacement of Black Oregonians in North and Northeast Portland that have been pushed out to many different parts of the states, and in some ways they left the state completely because they can't find a way to live here affordably. I'm interested, do you have any thoughts about TIF or just the role of Prosper Portland in economic development?
Mm-hmm. To be frank, I feel like I need to learn more about TIF districts. It's a newer issue for me, and working in campaigning has taken up most of my time.
For sure.
But hearing that just from you, and it sounds like you guys have a lot of expertise to share with us as candidates and potential city council members, if there is something that is going to increase the cost of living for everyday Portlanders, and particularly for Black and Brown Portlanders, then that's not something that I would be in support of, because I want to make sure that the people that are actually living in our city, that are working in all of our stores, our coffee shops, everything that make Portland the lovely place that it is, they deserve to live a life of dignity and not be so stressed out about money, the cost of rent, the cost of food, everything. So I would actually love to learn more from you guys about what the research is showing about TIF districts and how they impact BIPOC communities.
Thank you for that. I am looking forward to chatting a little bit more about that. I'll pass it to you. I know TIF was something obviously that was discussed when you were in council. as well as some of the conversations with the anti-displacement PDX way back when. Yeah, let's talk about what it looked like, and what plans you may have for Prosper Portland and its role in TIF in general.
So I am always a bit skeptical about using TIF because TIF is actually a way for the city to steal money from the county and the schools and its own general fund to spend on something else, because the property taxes don't go to the, the increase in property tax value doesn't go to the county, doesn't go to the schools, and gets set aside in the context of the city. So I think just for that reason, it's something that should be used very sparingly. Before I was on the council, Eric Sten pushed hard, as I recall, to get 30% of TIF money spent on affordable housing. And then while I was there, I can't remember if it was an official policy, but at least for some new districts, Nick Fish pushed to get 50% of the money from TIF spent on affordable housing. And there were some circumstances where TIF districts were used to improve, add transportation amenities, which as the transportation commissioner, I liked. So I think that it's a tool that should be used carefully and selectively when it can increase the supply of affordable housing, when it can add important amenities. I confess that I haven't tracked closely enough particular proposals that are on the table now, but that's sort of my general attitude, is to address it very cautiously and remember that the money is not really free. It comes from other public services, so you have to really justify it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Definitely looking forward to chatting with folks around TIF, and it's getting, the process is moving very, very quickly in a way that I have never seen in the city before. I want to bring us back because I know I'm almost out of time for this question, and thank you so much for going on a fun journey with me around housing and planning, something that I love talking about as it relates to public housing. We love imagination. That's not a surprise here. We love even more when we're able to put some action items and some policies behind it. Going back to sweeps, just a quick question. Knowing that, sweeps cost us a lot of money, and I'm hearing from a little bit of both of you about wanting to use money more effectively. If you could use the money for something else, just crystal ball here, what would you think would be a good opportunity? I'm going to pass it to you first.
I think a really good opportunity, I think something that would be really easy to do with the money would be to help fund more. And I don't think that shelters are an immediate it's not a long-term solution. I would love to focus more on housing, but I think as a quick solution for some of the sweeps would be to start funding shelter models like Right to Dream. The folks there created that shelter actually autonomously. They took an empty lot on Burnside that the city had left unused for years. They negotiated with the owner of the lot and they rented it for $1 a year. And they set up an autonomous encampment that has tiny houses. I was talking with them recently because I visit them semi-regularly, and they were telling me that they're running that space for $65,000 a year. Which is crazy because that is not the cost of most services, and they're running something that's actually very holistic, where people are getting the help that they need at a place to stay. And I've talked to a lot of folks that have transitioned into permanent housing there. But I have a lot of concerns about shelter models as they're being created right now, especially with Urban Alchemy. I think that they have a history of having some staff abuse to the people that use the resource, and that happens because there is a disparate power between the unhoused people that are using the services and the people that are running the shelters. And I'm not saying that those people are villains. I'm just saying that that's par for the course when you have so much power over an individual that is so vulnerable. But at Right to Dream, because they have a council of the unhoused people that are actually collectively making decisions together, there is safety because they have their own power within that space. So that's something that I would love to see. It would be fairly inexpensive to set up, and we could actually give people the dignity they need rather than just pushing them from sidewalk to sidewalk. So,
thank you for that. Same question to you. If you had almost a crystal ball, how would you spend this money? Well, maybe not just crystal ball, policy. What are you thinking?
Well, first of all, I do want to say that $16 million is a lot of money, but it doesn't compare to the needs that we have. I mean, we need literally billions of dollars to to address the housing shortage that we have. We should have hundreds of millions of dollars a year for drug treatment. So it's not like $16 million is going to really go all that far in terms of solving bigger problems. I would agree with Angelita that since it's related to houselessness, investing that money in high quality shelter options make sense. One thing that I did want to mention before we leave here is that, I've said that the city talks about the absence of locations to put tiny house villages or other forms of humane shelter. The city happens to own some large plots of land known as golf courses. And I've asked, somebody in the city, have you considered using that land? And she said, well, we talked to people about that and it doesn't work because there's too many slopes, the photography doesn't work. And then I talked to a builder who said, I build on slopes all the time, and I can think of 3 of the golf courses that are definitely worth exploring. So that's something in particular. And I have nothing against golf. I realize golf is no longer something that only rich people play. I have nothing against public golf courses, but as far as I know, we do not have a golf crisis in the city of Portland. We do have a houselessness crisis. So that's one specific thing that I'd want to take a look at.
Thank you so much for that.
I love that.
Yeah, I see some synergy here.
I think Joanne Hardesty's talked about that too several
She
years ago.
tried to do it, but the golf people are quite intense. It would be a process for sure to get public buy-in.
I was going to say they're watching and they're gonna have some things to say, but
There aren't. They've got these clubs.
let's go on to question 4. We're doing pretty great on time. So this is also a long one, and then after that we're getting into some rapid fire. But in a recent meeting on violence prevention, City of Portland evaluation specialist Brian D'Ambrosio reported that gun violence in Portland has dropped by 22% since August 2023. Ryan also highlighted that there was a 38% reduction in Black gun violence victims over the past year. The city is attributing the overall decline in shootings to the success of gun violence prevention programs that received funding from both the City of Portland and the statewide allocations of the federal pandemic funds. There's this great organization, Healing Hurt People, that's a partnership between POIC, a Black-led nonprofit, and the city's Office of Violent Prevention. And this group, what they do is they offer counseling and outreach to community members at risk of gun violence. And then they also, this includes also victims of gun violence. I'm gonna go back to you. We're going like a 2-2 thing here. How will you prioritize the continued funding and the success of community-centered programs that have proven to prevent crime?
To me, that's one of my top priorities as far as what we're going to fund at the City of Portland. This question made me think of something I'm working on in my day job, which is School Meals for All, to make universal school meals for students in classrooms, breakfast and lunch. And something that we just learned from a study last year was that when kids are getting expelled from school, they started looking into why that's happening, and they found that students are acting out. And then they said, okay, why are those students acting out? And it turned out that they were getting into fights with other students because other students were identifying them as being low income or poor because they were using the reduced school lunch, and that was causing them to get into fights. And ever since we had more universal school meals in Oregon, we saw a great reduction in particularly Black, Brown, and Indigenous students being expelled from school because they were not being treated differently by their peers for their economic status. And I think that a lot of the programs under the Office of Violence Prevention have connected community to resources, right? If you have youth programs, if you have the mental health programs and counseling for folks that are impacted by gun violence, I'm fully in support of that. I'm also very interested in using environmental design to address crime. I think the placemaking projects are really interesting, and for folks who don't know what placemaking is, if you ever go into your neighborhood and you see like a beautiful street that's closed down and there's like rainbow paint on the floor and it's a little communal area in the middle of your street where people are able to walk through because there's not a fear of cars driving through or a drive-by shooting happening, that's placemaking. And that's done with all of the neighbors making that decision together. The neighbors come together to beautify the space and to use it differently. It creates a community space where people can meet each other in public because we don't have any free third spaces anymore where people can exist outside together. And all of that is public safety. Getting to know your neighbors is public safety. Getting a place where you can walk outside and not worry about a speeding car or a drive-by shooting, that's public safety. So I love environmental design as a result of that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing some placemaking in. Similar question to you. how you prioritize the continued funding and success of community center programs that have proven to prevent crime.
So, I mean, my answer is it would be a really high priority. I can't say exactly how to replace the money that has been used from federal grants for this and a number of other things. There's I used to be married to a criminal justice researcher, and so I became familiar with some of the criminal justice research. And there's a guy named Patrick Sharkey, who's one of the leading criminal justice researchers in America, and he says that research has shown that actually police do reduce crime, unlike like investments in prisons. But having the presence of police does reduce crime. But he says, at what cost in terms of the relationship of the government and the community? And he says that in the context of the great crime decline between 1994 and 2014, community organizations played a large role. And it's hard for volunteer community organizations to keep going. And he said, we need more public investment in community organizations. So I think that that's right. The question is, where do you find the money? People in Portland, at least the public perception is people are tired of increasing taxes. Right now, although, as Angelita pointed out, there's a lot of people who would like to reduce funding for the police. The majority of Portlanders say in poll after poll, we need more police. So if you're going to shift resources from the police to community organizations, that's going to require an intensive public discussion to get people to buy into it. I think that, and of course, we also need to be sure we're investing in community-based organizations that really make a difference. I actually need to know more about healing hurt people, but you of course can't assume that people just say, hey, we're a community organization, we'll solve the problem, that they know what they're doing. So I think you need to be looking at examples here and also examples like in Boston, which has had this phenomenal success of how do they identify the community organizations that are most effective and how do they fund them.
Thank you. I want to put some links in our caption. You know me, I'm just throwing resources left and right, but there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation out there. I want to remind folks listening and watching that our police budget is nearly $300 million. Despite this large amount of sum, there's actually quite a lot of vacancies in the police department, and there has been even before the pandemic. So this perception, which I know you mentioned a little bit earlier, that we don't have enough police, we give them money to hire more police. They're not hiring them. They're using it for other things that we can talk quite a bit about. I want to go back to you. Is there anything else you would like to add around this concept, again, about funding and the success of this community-centered programming?
I'm trying to think if I said anything that I want to add. No, I think honestly, I don't think that police are providing the public safety that we need. So they do have a massive budget, far more than in the year that they were defunded, $15 million from them. They have a massive budget and we're not seeing the results. And I don't think that there's any other bureau that we have that we would say, oh, you're not producing the results that we need. Yeah, let's just give you a blank check and keep giving you more and more money to not produce the results that we're asking you to produce. Police seem to be the only agency that is given the benefit of the doubt to continuously not produce for us and get the most amount of money in the city. So I'm really invested in dealing with some of these programs and making sure that they're getting the adequate funding to treat the root of the problem instead of addressing crime, because that's something police address things after the fact. They're not addressing the reason why crime happens in the first place. And so that's really going to be my focus if I were elected on city council. And I think the fact that we talk about crime, but then we don't talk about the fact that when police do a shooting and they murder a member of our community who is often a Black, brown, or Indigenous person or someone dealing with a mental health crisis, that's a crime as well, or it should be, even though it often isn't. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't want to necessarily invest in that. I would love to give back to the community and to make sure that our resources are being allocated in the best way possible.
Thank you for that. I'm going to pass it back to you for 2 minutes. Do you have any closing thoughts around investments in community-centered programming?
Well, again, I want to go back to my hobby horse, which is reallocating prison funds. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that it definitely should be an option. And again, we spend, I mean, people talk about how crime is now, well, at least before the pandemic, and I think it's going back towards those levels. Crime is like lower than it's been since the 1960s. But in the 1960s, we had many fewer people in prison. So somehow we managed to have low crime rates with much lower level of prison use. And if you set up a system which allowed local jurisdictions to choose to not overuse prisons and invest that money in other things related to public safety, including in community or anti-violence community organizations, that could raise enough money to actually make a big difference. And again, I doubt that Nathan Vasquez is going to be lobbying with us for that, but I should actually ask him. It's part of the shame of Mike Schmidt losing that he would have been a partner in that.
Thank you so much, both of you. There are definitely quite a lot of that both of you mentioned that directly impacts the Black community here at a rate that's a little bit higher than I would say the other cultural groups and racial groups. I'm thinking a lot about the fact that Black people are over policed and funneled into prisons at a high rate. I'm thinking about the war on drugs and just constantly, you can see that when you go to the state prisons, which I have. And then also as someone who is, again, not from here, but I don't know if I would be here without the reduction of lunch costs or just free lunch programs that really kept me and my family safe during this time and allowed us to flourish. So I'm very grateful that you brought that into the space. Let's do my favorite part. Let's do some rapid fire. This is gonna be fun. I'm gonna do my best to both talk fast and slow at the same time, but we have 16 questions. We're gonna go back and forth, and what that's gonna look like is that you can only say 3 things. You're gonna say yes, no, or pass. I'm gonna ask you to fight the urge to add a little bit of something in there, just yes, no, or pass. We're gonna go through it, and again, 16 questions. I'm gonna actually put a little clock for myself. Let's go through it. So my first question, we'll start with you, Steve, first. Will you pledge not to accept contributions from police, prison, and the incarceration industry, not to seek their endorsements, and to publicly reject their independent expenditures? Yes, no, or pass?
No.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you support investing in quality, affordable housing to strengthen and make communities safer? Yes, no, or pass? Pass.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you support investing in living wage employment opportunities to strengthen and make communities safer? Let's go with you, Novick.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you support investing in public transportation to strengthen and make communities safer? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
Hell yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you support investing in education to strengthen and make our communities safer? Novak, yes, no, or pass?
Pass.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you support investing in healthcare that includes harm reduction, patient-driven approaches, as well as community-based mental health and substance abuse treatment to strengthen and make communities safer? Novak, yes, no, or pass?
Pass.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you support legislation banning both lethal and non-lethal force that can cause death against individuals exercising their First Amendment right? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you support legislation to remove the shield of qualified immunity in Oregon? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
Yes.
Hard yes.
Thank you so much. Do you support a ban on data sharing and all forms of collaboration between the U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the City of Portland bureaus, including the Portland Police Bureau? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
Pass.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you pledge to oppose a city budget that expands in any way the capacity of the police force? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
No.
Yes. Thank you so much. Do you support non-carceral justice strategies for community safety? Yes, no, or pass? Novak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Do you support zero tolerance legislation for police abuse of authority and abusive policing? Yes, no, or pass?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Almost done. Do you believe the violation of property should never equate to the violation of human life? Yes, no, or pass? No.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you support putting an end to the use of military-style equipment such as grenade launchers, long-range acoustic devices, which are called LRADS, Lord of mercy, and other technologies designed for war by the Portland Police Bureau? Yes, no, or pass?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Do you support the ban of facial recognition and predictive policing technology and other intrusive and discriminatory surveillance forms by the Portland Police Bureau? Yes, no, or pass?
Pass.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I think this is our last one. Do you support allocating resources to our most vulnerable community members, like the houseless communities, in ways that are not linked to over-policing or criminalizing poverty. Yes, no, or pass?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Whew, we got through it. Thank you all so much. I can't stress how nice it was to have this conversation, this debate with you both. This is a very busy time, and prioritizing the Black community feels very important. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the folks who are listening and watching to this Reimagining Public Safety debate. It was really, really lovely having you tune in. I want to thank our interpreters, our amazing film crew, our volunteering staff. Thank you for making this day and this moment possible. I want to remind you, for the folks listening and watching, democracy is not a one-time event. There is no perfect candidate. We encourage you to listen, to do your research, and to vote for the candidate that you think you can push towards justice. Before we close, I would love to have both of you share where we can find some more information about you. Let's start with you, Angelita.
Thank you guys so much for having me. Again, Angelita Morillo, or Angelita Morillo for those of you that speak Spanish. You can find more information about me on my website at angelitaforportland.com. My social media handles on X, Instagram, and TikTok is PNW Policy Angel, if you'd like to hear more about me just talking about policy as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Novick, where we can find you?
My campaign website is Novick for Portland, all spelled out, NOVICKFOR, Portland.com. And also, I'll just give out my personal email is stevenovick96@gmail.com if people want to contact me directly.
Thank you for that. As Oregon's first Black-led and Black-serving nonprofit that can endorse candidates, I want to remind folks who are listening and watching that we're going to make our endorsements, our candidate endorsements, as well as ballot measure endorsements after this debate is filmed. So to check that out, we ask that you go to our website. You can go to imagineblack.org/vote. Not only will you find our endorsements and our ballot measure endorsements, but you'll also find helpful information for voting, where you can drop off your ballot, that kind of thing, information about dates. We want to make sure you have all the things you can to participate in this event and hopefully continue to participate in democracy, which again is ongoing. It's every day. Again, my name is Joy Elise Davis. I am really honored, and it has been a pleasure to spend time with the both of you and with the folks watching and listening. I want you all to remember that a new world, a new Oregon, a new city is waiting. We just got to build it together. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great time.
At Imagine Black, we envision living in a city that loves Black people. We imagine a world where every Black person has the rights, resources, and recognition to be part of a thriving, resilient, and connected community. We are freedom dreamers. Now is the time to invest in Black liberation and self-determination. Your support is critical to this work. A donation to Imagine Black helps us maintain our capacity to affect change in the Black community. Your contributions can help us build Black voter power, advance the call to reimagine our public safety and criminal justice system, and push for a just transition from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. We all have a role to play in the movement for Black liberation. Go to imagineblack.org/donate. Please give generously. Together, we will turn dreams into reality.